Today, we are truly honored and blessed to have Slovie Jungreis Wolff with us. She will tell you a little bit about her background and what have brought her to what she does today. I will tell you that she and I grew up together in Lawrence, Long Island, probably 40 years apart. And you will realize that when she stands up here next to me. She is an incredible human being. I have to sincerely thank Candace and Stephen Stark for bringing Slovie to my attention. I was in Lawrence, what we call PF, pre-Frum, and Lawrence is now Frum. And it's a wonderful community, and she will tell us a bit about that. She's an acclaimed author, renowned lecturer, and parenting instructor. She's one of the most sought after and passionate speakers in the Jewish world when it comes to life, relationships, marriage, and most recently dealing with the current explosion, of course, in antisemitism and the lies and distortion being instilled specifically into young people's minds. That's what we're focusing on today. This stuff doesn't begin on college campuses. It begins long before that. And we have not been as vigilant as we should have been, and hopefully we'll get some pointers on how to correct that. Would you please welcome with me, Slovie.
Thank you. Alan, thank you so much for that beautiful introduction and for all your hard work in making this happen tonight. It's so nice to finally meet you in person. And Candace and Stephen, thank you for your love and for your graciousness and for hosting me and Mendy. We feel so at home. And welcome to all of you. It's so incredible to be here tonight. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I was born upon the ashes of the Holocaust. My father lost his entire family. His father, his mother, his sisters, his brothers, nieces, nephews. He came to this country after surviving a slave labor camp all alone. My mother, through the grace of God, survived Bergen-Belsen, along with her parents, my Zaidi, and my grandmother, whom we called Mama, and my two uncles. But there too, we lost grandparents, great-grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins. And when my parents, who were fifth cousins but only met here in this country, met, they realized that they had seen a physical Holocaust, but what they're now seeing is a spiritual Holocaust happening in front of their eyes. Before the war, there were 85 rabbis with the name Jungreis. I come from the Jungreis rabbinical dynasty. They all perished. Nobody left. What did my grandparents do when they came to this country? They started a yeshiva day school in Canarsie, Brooklyn, for children who knew nothing about their Judaism. In 1973, my mother, Rebbetzin Esther Jungreis, took Madison Square Garden. I was just a little girl sitting there. You'd be surprised, we're closer than you think. I was just a little girl sitting there. The room was pitch black, and suddenly, boom, the spotlight goes on. And there's my mother. My mother was maybe 5 feet tall, but she was a powerhouse. And she whispered into the mic, "You are a Jew. You have traveled the 4 corners of this world. You've gone through every form of persecution. By the end of the night, my mother looked at thousands
of eyes that were all on her and said, "Within every Jew there is what we call a pintele yid. It's a tiny spark, a little flame, but if you wish it, that tiny flame can become a great fire from which the words, Hineni, here am I, O God, shall emerge." That night, November 3rd, 1973, the Hineni organization was born, where my mother spent her life traveling the world, reconnecting Jews with their roots. I and my siblings are privileged to continue in my mother's footsteps, my father's footsteps, my grandparents' footsteps. Here's a life lesson that we learned. When you go through pain, when you go through something in your life that's a challenge, difficulty, you have a choice. You can either become bitter, you can become angry, you can get depressed, you can sit in darkness, or you can say, I am going to kindle a light and I will illuminate the darkness. That's how we grew up. Always illuminate the darkness. Always kindle a flame. When I got married, Friday nights, we would be at my parents' home. And this is how it would go. All the cousins would get together after the meal. They'd be in the basement. My father would come down. He would sing the Shema with all of the children. And then the children would turn to my mother and say, Bubba, can you tell us a story from when you were a little girl? My mother would laugh and she would say, sure. What would you like me to tell you? Tell us about what it was like, Bubba. And then my mother would say, you know, when I was a little girl, I didn't exactly go to camp the way you do. Tell us, Bubba. And my mother would give our children stories of resilience, of strength, of roots. One of their favorite stories was how my Zadie, my grandfather, my mother's father, in Bergen-Belsen, every single day, he would receive his portion, his ration of bread, if you could call it that. Instead of eating his bread, what did my Zadie do? He took that little moldy, crusty piece of bread and he would put it away. He would turn to my mother, to my two uncles, to my bubby, to my grandmother, and he would say, Kinderlach, children, 5 more days till Shabbos. Count the days. 4 more days till Shabbos. 3 more days, children. Count. 3 more days till Shabbos. 2 more days, 1 more day, and finally Friday night would come. My Zadie would take my mother and her 2 brothers, together with my bubby, my grandmother, and he would begin to sing Shalom Aleichem, welcome to the angels. Zadie would take out the little bread that he had, and he would say, Kinderlach, children, Machsuf Zioigen, close your eyes, imagine that you're home. Mama had gebakt the challah. Mama just made challah. One Friday night, after singing Shalom Aleichem and giving out this bread, my uncle, my little uncle, looked at my Zadie and said, Tati, father, you're singing about the angels, but there's no angels here. Wie bist the malachim? Where are the angels? There's no angels here. My Zadie began to cry and he said, you, my dear children, you are the angels of Shabbos. Wherever you go in life, remember that you are the angels of Shabbos. This became my children's favorite story. And I share this with you because I never could have imagined in my lifetime that I would have to draw upon those stories of faith, of roots, of strength, of inspiration for myself, for my children, for my children's children, to counter what is happening in our world today. 8 years ago, my mother left this world. But you know what she kept on saying? She kept on saying to us, Kinderlach, children, the world is on fire and we are sleeping. And we were looking at her 8 years ago. What are you talking about? I know what I see. I know where I've been. And we are pre-war Holocaust, she said over and over. And we didn't understand. The world is on fire and we are sleeping. Aspen is a majestic place. When my husband and I were landing yesterday, it took our breath away. And it pains me to think that I have come here tonight not to speak about beauty and majesty, but to speak about the ugly anti-Semitism that is filling the atmosphere. Not just college campuses, as Alan said. We're talking about pre-K, grade school, middle school, high school, college. That's what I'd like to share with you tonight. And we cannot afford to be sleeping. If we think about it, October 7th happened, and all of a sudden on October 8th, this hatred erupted across college campuses. My friends, I want to ask you something. Was everything okay October 6th? Did they love us October 6th? There's sewage under the ground, and there's a spillover. Not a week goes by that I do not speak to a parent, a grandparent, a student, a child who has a story to tell me about what is happening to them, where they are afraid. Their children are afraid to walk around with a chai, with a Magen David, with a Jewish star, with a hostage tag necklace. Stories of cyberbullying, of hatred, of harassment. On Friday, I spoke to a woman who studies with me, and she's a therapist. She told me that she has never been so busy on Zoom with students from all over America because of October 7th. Jewish students, I said to her. No, she said, of course Jewish students, but non-Jewish students. Why? Because they are being bullied if they do not join the marches. A boy had called her Friday, a young boy with terrible anxiety. He traveled home from school, he posted a picture of his home, and all of a sudden, he's being killed on social media because he did not post marches, chants, Hamas. He posted a picture of his home, and he's afraid to go back to college. This is what's happening. There's a new battle going on right now, and it is a battle for our children's minds. The battlefield is in the schools. The soldiers are the teachers and the textbooks. And I want us to talk about that right now, because we cannot afford to be sleeping. What is happening? It was difficult for me to even choose what not to share with you tonight. But here is what I would like to share with you. Rita LaHood, she teaches pre-K and elementary school in New York City. She's an art teacher. She makes maps of the world with her students. Every map that she makes is missing one country, and do you know what that country is? Israel. Her students are growing up believing that there is no such thing as the State of Israel. Karen Feldman, a teacher who works at an Upper East Side school in Manhattan, and it's not just in Manhattan. She speaks of the graffiti and the slurs that are written in the bathrooms all over school. She describes how one day she was in class and this was the conversation that was being spoken above kids' heads. What should we do with these dirty Jews? And another kid answers, I know, let's just put them in the oven. It's too late, she said. I'm afraid it's too late because the largest union in America is the teachers' union. 3 million members. In 2022, they had a resolution where they voted that any teacher that wants to speak about Palestine and Palestinians and give their narrative as what they think and what they believe, their biases, their prejudices, they are to be supported. 3 million teachers. Andrew Goldberg is a filmmaker who lives in Westport, Connecticut. His 11-year-old son was walking around to class. I think he was going to basketball practice. A group of boys surrounded him. Hey, I have a fun camp for you. They have great showers. It's called Auschwitz. Why don't you go? When he went to complain to the principal said that perhaps his son should find some new kids to sit with at lunch. Maybe that would solve the problem. They took their child out of public school and put him into a Jewish day school. I would suggest that everyone here reads a piece in The Atlantic called The Golden Age of American Jews is Ending. It's chilling. It speaks about kids who are texting their parents because they're frightened. Their teachers are organizing their classrooms to get up, leave school, go on marches, have sit-ins. Hundreds, 700 kids in Bryant Park. And these children are writing, posting, texting to their moms. I'm really frightened, Mom. Can you get me out of here? Take me home. Because they're chanting from the river to the sea. There is only one solution. Global intifada. They're walking around school and they say this, there goes the Jew, taking everyone's land. We must exterminate the Jews. That's a chant. In school, not college campuses. I'm speaking about grade school. Brown University Choices program is taught to 1 million public school students across the nation. This is the curriculum that our children are learning. In this curriculum, Israel is called an apartheid state and a military occupier. I'm going to give you one guess. Who is paying for this curriculum and who is paying for these textbooks? Anybody know? Qatar, the refuge of Hamas. Qatar has given millions of dollars to the New York Department of Education. What is the result? Here's a poll, Harvard-Harris poll. 67% of all people aged 18 to 24 believe Jews are oppressors and should be treated as oppressors. And I don't know if you saw the Wall Street Journal last week, but there's a young man who wrote an op-ed. He's a Columbia University student, and he is joining 48 other students in suing Columbia University. I want to show that real people are suffering from the hatred that has overrun Columbia University since Hamas's rampage in Israel. Here's a few points of what he says. After I attended a vigil last fall for the victims, many fellow students stopped talking to me. I was now called murderer routinely, and even a Nazi as I walked to class. I received an anonymous death threat on social media. I usually remained in my off-campus apartment, skipping class because I would have to walk past or through groups of students advocating violence against Jews. It has only gotten worse since spring semester. There have been constant teach-ins where students and outside organizers rail against Israel, praising Hamas. One teach-in denied that terrorism is a crime, and they describe suicide bombings as direct action protests. Everything has a clean name. When he went to complain, this is what happened. In October, I sent an email to 12 administrators and program directors in which I described the hate directed my way. Not one responded. When I met with the nursing school's Dean of Student Affairs after Thanksgiving, she questioned whether other Jews who had raised concerns were really actually students. She defended the students harassing Jews on the grounds of free speech. In the spring, another dean dismissed my concerns of anti-Semitism as nonsense and said that I was describing a lack of civility and not anti-Semitism. This is from pre-K up to college. This didn't happen in one day. This is happening in front of our eyes. We're sleeping. When I was growing up, I would ask my uncle, what was it like for you before you were deported, before you were taken away? What was it like before you were shoved into the cattle cars, sent to Bergen-Belsen? And my uncle told me that as a little boy, he would walk to school and he would always be afraid because there was this group of kids who would stop him. Yiddish Schwein, Jewish pig. They would surround him and they'd say, show us your palms. I said to my uncle, show us your palms? What do you mean, show us your palms? What does that even mean? Because Jews don't know how to work with their hands. White privilege, show us your palms. And then they would take a stick and they would beat him. Growing up, I never understood how it could be that there would be hundreds and thousands of Nazi youth marching, the brown shirts. They were the ones who hated the most. They even turned in their own parents. How is that possible to hate so much? But you see, Hitler, he knew the secret. And the secret to him of the final solution is this. Fill the empty mind of a child with hatred, and you've got it made. Because these are the future leaders, the future doctors, lawyers, reporters, council members, artists, filmmakers, judges. This is the future generation. Fill them with a false narrative. Fill them with your bias. Fill them with your prejudice. Fill them with your hate. And what do you have? You have a world filled with hate. A world filled with hate. Growing up, I would hear so many people say to my parents, Rabbi Rebbitzin, how could you still have faith? Where was God? And then I would hear my mother's response, you have the question all wrong. The question is not where was God. The question is where was man? Where was man when our people were raped, violated, burned, taken from their homes, slaughtered, murdered, killed. And I'm not speaking about the Holocaust. I'm speaking about October 7th. Now, where was man? We cannot afford to be sleeping. So what is it that we can do? 3 things. 3 C's. Commit, connect, create. And with this I close because I know Ellen has questions. Commit. Commit to be an advocate for your people. Don't accept that just because a child brings a textbook home from school, it is the truth. Commit to becoming part of your school board. Commit to looking at the books that your children, that your grandchildren, that your neighbors' children are reading, and who's paying for this? Who's sponsoring this? Be smart. Be an advocate. Because if not you, who? Who's going to do this now? Commit. Connect. Connect to our people. Connect to our land. Connect to our roots. Connect to Shabbos. More than the Jewish people have kept Shabbos alive, Shabbos has kept the Jewish people alive. That's what our sages teach us. Because once a week we come together as family. It's not Sunday, it's not Monday, it's not Tuesday. There's a spiritual energy in the day. Commit to your roots. Commit to raising strong children, strong families. Commit, create, connect. Connect to our land, connect to our people, meaning we don't have to look the same to love each other. We don't have to think the same to love each other. But we're all God's children, and we're family, you know? When there was the concentration camps, my family was taken away. No one stopped my mother. And no one stopped my Bubby and my Zadie. And no one stopped my father and said, wait, which synagogue do you go to? 1 second, do you wear a kippah or not? And on October 7th, we have the recording of a terrorist who called home and said on the phone of a woman that he just murdered, Father, he calls back to Gaza, I just killed 10 Yehuds. Their blood is on my hands. 10 Yehuds, 10 Jews. He didn't say 10 Israelis. Because this is a battle against the Jewish people, and it's a battle against Western civilization, democracy. And we cannot afford to be sleeping. Create a strong, proud, new generation who knows how to stand up against evil, against Hamas, against terrorism, against murder, against savagery. And with this I end. My full name is Slovie. I was named for my Bubby, the Rebbitzin, Slovie. Actually, I and my siblings all carry the names of our grandparents or our great-grandparents who were killed in Auschwitz. When I was born, my mother told me that the nurse came in with the birth certificate and said, what would you like to name your child, dear? I'll help you fill it out. And my mother said, Slovie. The nurse said, I'll come back when you're feeling better. But that's my name. And I'm so proud because I know where I've come from. I know who I am. And if you don't know where you come from, you don't know where you're going in life. You have to know where you come from. So I'd like to leave you with a voice of hope. The last time my Bubby, the Rebbetzin Slavachana, was seen on this earth, she was walking into the flames, the gas chambers of Auschwitz. And she was holding her youngest grandchild, her grandbaby, in her hands. The last words she ever uttered on this earth were, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. If you and I with somebody have been there, just seeing the scene, seeing the Nazi guard in his boots and his fur hat and his fur coat and his German shepherd screaming Yiddish Schwein, Jewish pig. And then we'd see the Bubby, this little Bubby holding the baby in her arms, saying the Shema and walking into the concentration camps, into the ovens. And I'd say to you, let's have a bet. Let's have a bet. 2024, who do you think will still be standing? How many of you would have said the Bubby? That's called faith. And I have that faith. I came here to share that faith with you. And I thank you so much for listening. Am Yisrael Chai, the Jewish people.
For those of you who may be just a little bit verklempt, I'll give you a moment. What a beautiful presentation. Thank you, Slovie.
Thank you. It was really an honor to be here.
Just coming from Lawrence, I would expect nothing more, nothing less, indeed. I'd like to talk about a few things before we open the floor to questions. And I appreciate what you said in your description, because you ended it with what we could do. Because especially many of you, including one specific gentleman sitting in the back, is always saying to me, you pointed this out, what can we do? What can we do? So I appreciate that part. You talked about oppressors, and it's so important for all of you to understand that what's going on now in all levels of schooling is a simple division. You're either part of the oppressed or you're part of the oppressors. And anyone who's white is an oppressor, that's just a given. And of course, all Jews are oppressors because they're all white. No, they're not. Some 50 to 60% of Jews in Israel, the Sephardim, are not white. And yet, that's just all thrown in. We don't care about that because they're all white, they're all oppressors, they're all nationalists. So that's the essence of the undergoing of the underlanguage on university, high school, and now grade school campuses. I just want to read you about something that Slovie mentioned, a coalition, and this is today reporting on yesterday. A coalition of US Jewish groups on Monday denounced the AFT, the American Federation of Teachers, Randy, Weinblatt or Weingrab? Yeah, nice Jewish girl. One of the largest educators unions in the country. They were denounced for including anti-Israel resolutions in the agenda of its upcoming annual convention. The resolutions, 7 in total, run the gamut of anti-Zionist ideology, calling for the end of U.S. military assistance to Israel, while falsely accusing the country of genocide, a ceasefire in Gaza that would halt Israel's mission to clear Hamas from territory, and divestment from Israel in the form of selling American Federation of Teachers Israel bonds. Another resolution accuses supporters of Israel of weaponizing anti-Semitism to shield Israel from criticism. This is the American Federation of Teachers, 3 million teachers. And of course, the canard of accusing Israel of genocide, for those of you who were here to hear Mort Klein last Monday, he quoted the number of Arabs in Israel in 1948, around 120, 130,000. Now there are 1.4 million. So he has personally spoken with Prime Minister Netanyahu and told him he's got to fire the head of the genocide department because he's doing a lousy job. That canard of genocide. We have, Judy and I have a niece in New York City. And this is the first question I want to pose. I'm sorry for going on and on. These are a Jewish family who bring up their kids Jewish. They do Shabbat, not heavily like many of us do, but it's enough to keep the flame burning in the family. And they have dealt with their children in good public schools in Midtown Manhattan on the East Side. And what they told my wife and I was really surprising and shocking. They are now applying to Catholic parochial schools because that's where they know, A, their children will be safe, B, they will get a decent traditional education. Think of this. Tell us your thoughts, please.
I would like to advocate Jewish day school. How about that? Okay.
I'm not surprised.
I know some parents who have sent their children, and it's good, but our children are missing roots. And when you don't have roots, the wind comes and the tree just blows and falls. It's not so hard to give a child roots, but I can give a child what I myself don't have. And knowledge is power. So wherever you go, there's always more to study and more to learn. That's what's so beautiful about our Judaism. And it's not difficult. Some people think, well, I don't know enough. Start with just Shabbos, a Shabbos candle at your table. You don't know what that does for a child. I'll just add this. The Torah is our wisdom for life. When Joseph was in Egypt, he was the only Jew in Egypt, 17 years old, the only Jew in Egypt. And our sages teach us what kept him connected. He didn't have his parents. His mother passed away. He didn't know where his father was. He didn't know where his siblings were. He was sold as a slave. Do you know our sages teach us? When he was in prison in Egypt, he remained loyal. Diukno shel aviv imo, which means the image of his mother and father. We have to ask ourselves, when my child thinks of me, what is the image that comes to their mind? What words do they hear? What do they see when they think of me? If you got that, you got roots.
That's beautiful. It is incredibly important. But I'm going to say something that I don't mean with any disdain.
But always gets me nervous.
And that is that the reality in this country right now is that there is a large portion of the Jewish population who is not there. And they are looking, aside from these beautiful suggestions, to have their kids survive and give them the best education that they can, because after all, they have to go to Harvard and Stanford and Yale. Fed. Okay? Hopefully that's changed big time. I went to Penn, I'm embarrassed to say. I'm embarrassed to say that because of the anti-Semitism, the Jew hatred on campus. But I'm also embarrassed to say it because if you think you want to declare yourself as a woman and be on the men's swim team and become on the women's swim team, that's okay too at Penn. Okay, this is absolutely, there's an Irish word, we call it meshuggah. Brown University is the seat of the Ivy League's Jew hatred and academic activity against Jews and against belief of Jews. Brown University. Can it wait? You gotta ask it right now.
I can wait.
Okay, thank you. We'll call on you first. And what kids are learning in school, there's no more history, there's no more civics, there's the narrative of the teacher, there's the narrative of what the textbook says, because your history is what you make your history. So that follows with what these children are being taught, and of course what they're being taught on college campuses.
I still would say that every parent has an ability to give a child a sense of roots. It doesn't matter how little or how much we know. I believe it, I've seen it, my life mission is to connect to families. And I speak really, thank God, all over the world, but the ones that I've studied with for the past 30 years, we've become family. And it's a beautiful thing to see the next generation embrace together with their parents. So it's never too late. That's what I want to say.
And indeed, so it's important to have Slovie, Jungreis, Wolff in your home. Each of you in your home. Well, that's ridiculous. That can't be. Yes, it can. You can go to this incredible website that this woman has. I've looked at it numerous times. There is so many stories on this site that are heartening and warm and beautiful. It's truly worthwhile to spend some time there and to try and bring your family into that.
What's the website?
Hmm?
The name of the website.
Slovie will tell you that.
Well, first of all, I have a book that I just came out with this year. It's called The Soul of Parenting, and it's very easy reading. It's not just for parents, it's for grandparents or anyone who has a child in your life and you want to give the child a sense of family values, roots, to be a good person. Lighting a Shabbos, it gives you really point by point how you can do that. So I would say that. You can also find me on YouTube with talks. And we have a Hineni website as well, which is our organization. You can always be in touch with me. I'm in touch with families from really all over the world who would like to give their children a little bit more. Because in a world that feels so unstable, that's the stability that we give. The roots, the strength, the empowerment, the pride.
Just before we open the floor to questions, and I know there are going to be a number of them, there's one topic that I've been trying to touch on, which is the impressionable children being exposed to this whole gender alteration business. You can be a boy, you can be a girl, you can be a bird, you can be a cat. I mean, all almost a ganze Mishpachet, a whole thing. And I want to get your thoughts on that. And it still goes back to family, obviously. But what I want to get across here is something I think most of you are not aware of. There are psychologists and psychiatrists in the audience and throughout the country who, when you come in, even as a child, to speak with them, there's a kind of therapy that is well known. It's called exploratory therapy. You have this problem that you're complaining of. Let's sit down, let's discuss it. Makes sense. That's what you do. Only today, there are restrictions on what you could say to young people or people of any age, but mostly young people, single ages and into their teens, who, when they walk into the therapist's office and say, I want to become a boy, no longer do the professional societies permit those clinicians to say, okay, come on, let's sit down and let's discuss this and see how you came to this decision. There is something now called affirmation care. Affirmation care means you must first affirm what the child or teen is telling you. I hear you, you're right, now let's sit down and how can I help you achieve this? Finally, the American College of Pediatricians, the real doctor's arm of pediatrics, has said, you people gotta stop this. This is totally inappropriate. So understanding affirmative care or affirmation care and affirmation therapy, which then they tell the parents, if you don't go along with this, you will be endangering your child who will look to commit suicide because you haven't let this happen. That's a lot to swallow. Can you please somehow comment on that and what you've seen in your own travels working with children and parents?
I would say that I think it's very difficult for children growing up in the world today. It's a very tough world. It really is. And Jewish wisdom is immutable. It never changes. So if we want to really find hope for our children, what do? The word in Hebrew for hope is what? Does anybody know? Tikva. Tikva means hope. And the root of the word tikva is kav. Kav means a connection. Why does the word hope have the root of the word connection? Because what gives you hope with a child or in any relationship? When you have a connection. If I'm connected to you and I have a line, a kav is a line, if I'm connected to you, there's always hope. It's when we're, God forbid, cut off, that there's no more hope. For children today who are growing up in such a difficult world and social media, peer pressure, they get their news from TikTok. There's so much pressure on them. If one kid decides to do this, then I want to do this too. What's a parent or a grandparent to do? You must be a force in that child's life to give hope and remain connected. So I would say that the answer really is connection, and not to lose connection with children, no matter who you are. You can be a grandparent, you can be a neighbor, you can be an aunt, you could be a mother, a father, grandfather, uncle, but keep connected with children. When you do that, you have hope. Everything else falls away.
Thank you. Questions, please. Let's take our first one here. Now, this is a group. I don't think I have to say make it a question.
Okay. Can you hear me? Yes. For those children or young adults that are in colleges and are not at home, I wonder how you feel about the move to try to shore up Hillel organizations on campuses so that they become the surrogate families to these college students?
Great question. I don't think it only has to be Hillel. There are a lot of resources. I would tell you that it must have been 5 years ago, pre-COVID, a group of young women reached out to me from a college campus, and they said that they're terrified walking around. This is 5 years ago. Terrified walking around. They had to take their mezuzahs down. Roommates are canceling them because they're speaking about Jewish values, and they're scared. And they asked if we can do a Zoom once a week to just, as I said before, be connected. It gave them strength. So I think it's important that when children go off to college campuses, and you have to really think about which campuses you're choosing to send children on to today. There are other choices, but when they are there, they really must be feeling strong through Hillel or any of the other. There's Chabad, there's Olami, there's many, many. And we ourselves in our organization have many college students who are in touch. Now that they've graduated, because it's 5 years later, I teach them in person in New York City. So really the key is connection. It's frightening to be alone on college campus.
Hi, I just want to make a comment that your mother would be very proud of you. May she rest in peace, because you have the same passion. You almost talk the same way. Sheila and I had the opportunity to go to Israel with your mother, and I grew up hearing stories. My parents didn't go through the Holocaust, but so many members perished. And if I went to my aunt or if I went to my uncle, they would always sit and tell me stories. And I think storytelling, the stories are missing in this generation. And what I remember most about your mother was her stories and with the passion. So in addition to connection, I think somehow we have to bring back stories.
Stories of our people. I want to tell you that when you are witness to a witness, you become a witness yourself. And that's the power of a story.
By the way, that was not a question.
But I loved
But
it.
it was beautiful. It was beautiful. Is this a question?
I'm from the 60s and I follow rules.
Thank you for those beautiful words. Before we read your book, could you make some suggestions what grandparents might be able to do to help, what's the right word, motivate or inspire their children when their own parents won't do that?
With Judaism, you're saying? Yes. So first of all, I would say, and that's a great question, I would say that children don't appreciate lectures. Remember, being a child, we don't appreciate lectures, but we do appreciate time. If I would go around this room, and I do this when I give parenting courses and classes, and I would ask everyone to think of their happiest memory as a child, it would never be a thing. It would always be a moment in time, or a place with cousins, or grandparents, or camp. And we think that if we just buy our children this or that, they're going to be happy and will be connected. But it's not the thing. They want time. So when you do that time together with a child, that's your opportunity to infuse. So I always start with Shabbos, Friday night dinner. Why? Because there is a spiritual energy in the night, and besides that, it's time for family. Use whatever love you have for that night. Make it enjoyable, make it beautiful, not about lectures. And choose a story for that night that you are going to share at the Shabbos table with the children at your table. The Shema is a prayer. Do you know that I'm a bubby? I'm a grandma myself now. But when I go to sleep at night, I close my eyes and I still hear my father saying the Shema with me. Never left me. If you could say Shema with a child. If your children don't live near you or your grandchildren don't live near you, make it a custom
a family minhag, a family custom. Fridays, you call to say good Shabbos. If they don't call you, you call them. Say Shabbat Shalom. You start creating those connections. Celebrate Jewish holidays. Read up yourselves. Because when you have that knowledge, you can share it. And when you're passionate about something, your children and your grandchildren become passionate. If you're passionate about skiing, even if your kids are not, even if they're living in Florida, in Miami, or in California, you're going to get those kids skiing. If you're passionate about music, about art, your grandchildren will be passionate about music and art. Be passionate about your Judaism.
Since you're in the Big Apple, what are major Jewish organizations doing to try to talk to presidents of these woke universities to be sensitive to what's going on and not just dismiss it as free speech?
I don't think that they're doing, I don't even know if they would be doing more if there really is an answer. You know, my mother spoke in Fort Hood, Texas, and she gave her story. There was a little boy in the audience, and he raised his hand, a military child, and he said, "Rebbitzin, ma'am," that's how they speak, "Rebbitzin, ma'am, where were the police? Where were the army?" And my mother said, "What an American question that is." And now we have another question. Where are the college professors, and where are all the presidents, and where? You saw what happened in Congress. There's nothing that they did that really made a difference right now. This boy wrote in the Wall Street Journal, it's only gotten worse. So we have to give our children the voices and the knowledge, because when they're confronted with haters who say, "You occupy, you're apartheid, you stole land," do your children have the answers to that? Do you have the answers to that? Because if you don't, then what will the future be? You need to have the answers.
This is not a question. This is a story. It's a sign of hope to me. And Slovie, please feel free to comment or not. Alan, you're responsible for this comment because you said that you went to the University of Pennsylvania. You said you went to Penn, the University of Pennsylvania. So my story of hope is somebody that I know who is a student, who's a freshman at UPenn, who is half Jewish, didn't grow up with a lot of sense of Judaism. When I asked her parents, how did she deal with the anti-Semitism on campus? How did it impact her? The response was, it made her feel more Jewish.
There is an awakening today, a beautiful awakening. So in every darkness, our sages teach us, and this is Jewish wisdom, whenever there's darkness, something beautiful is being born. And something beautiful is being born, and that is love and connection. Thank you for that story. When you're a student and you're sitting at graduation, I got a call after University of Michigan's graduation. There's a family that I teach. They went, and wow, the hatred over there and the chanting and the screaming. The kids felt so strongly about their identity and their Judaism afterwards.
That's very interesting because a gentleman told me that he was at that graduation and his daughter and their friends said something to him because of what was going on about their political thoughts. I'm not going into that, but you would have been very surprised as what they were saying for young people, and that was remarkable. So that really had an impact. Students are fed up with this. Whether they're Jewish or not, they are fed up. College is supposed to be fun, you know? You're supposed to go and learn and have dates and drink beer and, you know, stupid things that are fun. That's gone lately. Sorry, that's not a question either.
You're allowed.
All right, well, first I'm going to say I love what you're saying about connection and family connection and multi-generational. I think it's so important, and that does ground our kids. And when they're faced with all of other temptations, much less the evil that's going on right now, it does give them that grounding. But my question I have is for you and for Alan. I would really love to hear each of your answers. I am wondering where you think this anti-Semitism resurgence started. When in our country did it come back? Why did it come back? And to what do you attribute it?
I'll let Alan go first.
Well, I don't think it ever went away. That's the problem. It stayed under the surface. What's happened in the past 10 years that's different to me is that it used to be the Nazis, okay, the neo-Nazis. That many people, they're loud, they're obnoxious, that's where they were. Now, it's coming also from the left, but it's less of extreme left as it is in Congress. It's become mainlining. It's normal conversation now with people who are filled with hate in Congress saying things. And thank God one of them just lost their primary, who was awful with respect to what he was saying. So it became mainstream that people were talking about this and make-believing it was really just anti-Israel, not Jew hatred. Well, we know how false that is. So it's always been there, it's been under the surface. Then it was mostly far out on the right. Now it's come from the socialist type folks where it's become normal language.
Okay, so my follow-up to add to the question that is in my mind, do you think that with the election of Barack Obama, who does not follow the Judeo-Christian traditions, and then additional lawmakers that were brought in through the Democrat Party, do you think that that had an influence, which then, goes forward to the education system and our schools and the teachers?
I apologize, but it had to have had some impact. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'd also like to add that social media has allowed hatred and false narratives to spread. And it's just allowed. Also, when it comes to hating Jews, you're allowed to say things that you're not allowed to say about other people. And it's okay.
And you keep trying to say, what if we just took out the word Jew and put in the word black person? It would be utterly intolerable. You couldn't even think about saying it. But it's Jews.
It's work. I have just a quick comment and then a question. As Elliot, you were asking about grandparents. I really think that grandparents are critical in today's environment because so many of us were raised, it was a different time, it was a different generation, and I know for myself, I was raised with so much from my parents, and I gave it to my son, but then my son develops other relationships, and so it goes. So I play a very big part with my two grandsons. They come over every weekend, and we have a class. We do the Parsha, we do holidays. I always find something online that they can look at, a little video. We go to the text, and then they draw a picture. And they like it so much that when, we get busy and we don't do it, they ask me, when are we gonna do our class?
That's beautiful.
So I just think that there are grandparents in this room and that we are so critical to this connection that you're talking about. Okay, my question, which may be a little off topic, but it's been on my mind so much, and I've had so many instances of it. And these are young Jews who are sort of saying, don't confuse me with the facts about Judaism since the war. And they're speaking against Israel, and they are very pro-Palestinian, which I won't say is a bad thing, but you have to separate that out from Hamas. And I think a lot of these young Jews are not educated about Jewish history and about the history of Israel and about how all of the things that have gone before that have created the situation that we're in. Do you have any thoughts or guidance about what we can do about that?
Well, we don't know our history, that's for sure. We don't know our history. So the children or the young adults are being given just whatever they're being told, and they believe that to be truth. 2 years ago, I had Ron Dermer, the former ambassador to Israel, speak for an entire day for many different groups that I teach. And we ended the night with young adults and college campus kids. You couldn't get in, the line was snaked out the door. They wanted to know, and they asked all types of questions, and they challenged him, and he answered, he responded. But if they don't have the facts, so it really, unfortunately, comes back to the roots that are missing. The story of our people is missing. When did we first come to the land of Israel? When did it start? How did we get there? What's Jerusalem all about? What's our connection to Jerusalem? Zionism. When you say that anti-Zionism is not the same as anti-Semitism, you're making such a mistake. It's the same thing, it's just in another pretty package. It really is. It's anti-Judaism. And it's painful to see how ignorant our children are. I'm going to leave a question. Whose fault is that? Whose fault is that? How did we get to this place? It's a painful question with painful answers. But not too late. Not too late.
I won't support what you just said. I don't know where this is coming from, but this is relatively new in terms of America, and it certainly has come from since the Middle East issues going on. And I don't know whether it's coming from the Middle East, not Palestine. Why is Palestine all of a sudden such a big? This has been going on for 40 years.
So this has been longer.
You talk about the schools. Where is that starting from? And we have it going on. Never when I was in school, I never heard one negative Jewish comment all the time I went to school and to college. But now all of a sudden we have teachers teaching this in school. Who's supporting that? What's the stimulus from where they're getting this from?
So for the past 15 to 20 years, we have not realized, but Saudi Arabia, okay, go back to 9/11, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, countries that support terrorism in the Middle East have been creating textbooks for our children, your children, and you and I were not realizing that. We were sleeping. I did see this in the news 15, 20 years ago. We were warned about this. Oh, please, it's so stupid. It'll never happen in America. It'll never happen. Who's going to let that happen? Would you believe scenes that you've been seeing happening in this country? The violence, the destruction of sacred college campus places, and nothing happens to these kids who come?
Well, the professors are basically they're doing this, they're supporting.
So it started 15 to 20 years ago if you look into it, but we were sleeping. Because we were happy to take the money for the textbooks and the curriculum and the professors and to endow certain chairs in universities.
I read a very interesting article a few days ago about the massive amount of money coming from the Middle East, It used to be Saudi Arabia was big at this. It's now Qatar, or Qatar, which, as you know, is a big supporter of a group, what's their name? Hamas? Something like that. They're big supporters of the mullahs in Tehran, Iran. Billions of dollars. And they hire professors and they do studies and they contaminate the American culture with this ridiculous fantasy that has become, unfortunately, a very horrible matter.
It's a reality. You are correct. And you just have to look at Europe to see that we're next.
We will still entertain questions up front, so please join us up front to say to Slovie, thank you so very much.